As someone who tends to make music from time to time, I also listen to a lot of music in equal parts, aiming to look with more of a critical eye in the art. I try to dissect why I like something about a song and what does and doesn't work for me. And then sometimes I just find something I just vibe with. Hello. Unfortunately, I'm back from the forbidden 25th hour of the day talking about whatever I decided to. In this case, Accvsed, forming in 2021, the German metal, or maybe metalcore, the line's really fuzzy. Anyway, the metal-ish band came to me through a very random set of circumstances. There's this creator, his name's Tyler Rossow. He had come up just kind of randomly while I was doom scrolling one day, and he was showing off different new metal drops for the week. I had never heard of the guy, so I didn't know that that's apparently something he does every single week, but of those drops of that particular week, in the first video I saw of him was Accvsed, specifically the song Unraveled. So to clarify, a guy I had never heard of posted a video showing off a band I had never heard of. So I checked it out because the snippet that Mr. Tyler Rossow? Tyler Rossow? Is that how you pronounce it? Not the point. The snippet was awesome. So I did what any sane person would do and immediately consumed all of their content like a Pac-Man. That's normal, right? Right? By the way, while I'm rambling here at the intro, the starting of this video, did you know that absolutely 0% of everyone watching this video currently is subscribed? That's because I made this channel 5 minutes before uploading this video that you're currently watching. Let's keep it that way though, it's really funny. And while I would very much love to gush about every single song they've ever put out for the next hour, I will instead limit myself to just one album. Well, half an album, the debut EP, House of Doubt, released on December 1st, 2023. This album is where Accvsed went from pretty banger to my most anticipated new band this decade. They do deal with a lot of really dark subject matter though, and we're going to go into some pretty dark places on this deep dive. My brain wouldn't let me stop once I started. You know how it is. But that being said, there is a massive content warning. There's going to be topics revolving around self-harm, unhealthy coping mechanisms, and abusive relationships. Please keep all of that in mind as we go in. Take care of yourself first, alright? The subject may be important to me, but if you're in a bad headspace, maybe come back later. I'll still be here. I do think I have rambled enough though, so let's get into the music itself, shall we? The EP starts off with this absolute banger of a song I know I would have screamed my lungs out to back in 2016. It's got this through-line synth texture melody I feel I'm not smart enough to properly talk about in its correct terminology. It almost feels like an EDM sample, and as the lead vocalist comes in with this muted, distant feeling scream, I feel the walls getting closer. The rest of the drums stop sounding like they're, in the next room as the guitars kick in. And I love when songs do that, starting off with this very strong through line we will hear for the full song, and everything else feeling really distant. To me, it's always read like this: you may not be able to handle this, but you have a lifeline. And as the lyrics imply, our boys can't handle it either. A soul without a silver lining, in pain I've roamed the earth, falling apart, expose my deviancy. While I'm hardly going to go through every single line on this album as much as I desperately want to, I will bring up enough to help illustrate what I'm trying to convey with their respective songs. In this case, that is the feeling of isolation and othering that this song places its weight with. In layman's terms, it's not heavy for the sake of heavy. The heavy is being matched in a lyrical tone. And if you still don't get it at this point, have you ever, formed a thought about music before? Has that, happened? Are you okay? Do you need a hug? The chorus goes into this point with more emphasis. I'm reaching out. Is anybody out there? Help me out. An engine running low. Lost in the crowd. Is anybody out there? Anybody. This is the first half of the chorus, but even with that, we can see this incoming desperation start to grab hold. This recognition of needing help but understanding that it may be too late. And the scream at the end of the chorus, a final desperate plea for anybody. And all this after saying that every night these walls that were mentioned are closing in. The second half of the chorus almost being devoted to this idea that they largely put themselves in this situation, a situation that seems to have left them stranded and crying out for anybody to help. Counterintuitively, there is a melodic nature to these vocals during the chorus. While I do like them, they are very pleasant. I almost feel a more stripped back version would have helped to emphasize the ideas presented here a lot better. But it's a rather minor nitpick, and the very next part of the song, the pre-breakdown verse, for lack of a better term, and subsequent bridge is handled stunningly well. And I'm glad they didn't strip back the chorus to help put more emphasis here. The lines, constant pressure, I'm falling, when will I hit the ground? And the next measure is subdued with only a synth, and the dying chords from the last note on the guitar, it's just peak. It is just peak. And the next verse comes in where the vocalist, and for the record, I'm going to continue calling him the vocalist. I looked online, I could not find anyone in the band, any of their names, so I'm going to simply refer to them by what they do within the band. Let me know in the comments if you find out who they are, because I would prefer to call the band members by their actual name instead of what they do. It feels disrespectful, but I don't have the information necessary, unfortunately, so here we are. Anyway, as I was saying, the vocalist comes in and it feels like this internal monologue almost. I know for sure I've had this conversation in my own head with myself, and that feels so much like what's being said on this bridge. And the more prominent vocalization coming in, almost like this, oops, I didn't mean to say that out loud moment, only to repeat it with full force. It feels like giving up trying to hide it. And the slight sound of someone possibly coming in before saying it with his full chest, it kind of makes it depressing in a way. Like you're crying out for anybody, and you may have ruined a moment of someone finally coming in to help because you couldn't take it, and subsequently you let out those emotions you've been internalizing for so long. And as someone who's constantly dealt with feelings of isolation and not feeling like I can reach out and grab hold of anyone, the song ended up being very personal for me. I'd say more than any song on this album, but I'd be lying. Let's be honest. When this EP came out, I was constantly feeling like no one was around to help me through anything I was dealing with, and that I largely had no one to talk to. And looking back, I still feel like I didn't at the time. I remember sitting in the cold outside, listening to this song and feeling like I was seen in my perceived invisibility. I was fortunate to eventually build a better support structure and move past those feelings I was dealing with. And for what it's worth, if you're feeling unseen, know that it doesn't last forever. It might take some new friends, and it will take time, but trust the process, if only a little bit. Purify me in my fears. I failed to realize that all I needed is right here. Holy shit, what a way to open a song. No, it's not new. It's very much not a new concept, but it's the first line specifically that is just mwah, chef's kiss. And then to follow it by saying that the person is the lighthouse showing them the way out of the decay the singer is experiencing. Peak. Yes, give me more. I should probably mention the instrumentation. It starts off with this very distorted and simple sounding guitar riff. It's almost saying the threat isn't gone, but things are better. Only to then blast off when the lighthouse is mentioned. The slightly disgusted sounding delivery on the backing vocals in this first verse is also just so good. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. Like, it's good. It's just good. I think. And then the opening to come back and just being recontextualized by the song thus far and the new lyrics added for the chorus. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Backtrack slightly to the lighthouse. It's not a one-off line. The following lines mention siren calls and ships being led to sink. And that line plays into another line where the vocalist mentions screaming out for this person, and that silence was all that was left when they did so. If you haven't gathered, water is a huge part of this song, lyrically speaking. I know, stunning commentary from your local trans fam. How would you have ever pieced together that a song titled Currents might have water imagery? It's truly remarkable. Anyway, you helped me swim against the tide. When drowning seemed to be my last goodbye, I failed to realize that all I needed is right here. It's the second half of the chorus. You heard the first half at the start of the song. Also, can we just talk about the funny synth bit after goodbye? Big serotonin from that. For real, like, big serotonin. And then this second verse, which I am going to read in full. I wouldn't ask for nothing else, just a place to rest my head. This current will guide our path, swim against the tide. I failed to realize that all I needed was for you to see the best in me. And now we go into this line by line, because I cannot stop myself, and now we're really going to start having an Irish moment about this song. It starts off with this acceptance that he needs for nothing more, just the safety and feeling of belonging after fighting off these waves and tides he's been drowning in. The tides themselves likely being a stand-in for depression, as it's a very common analogy. However, I do wish to emphasize that I am unsure of that. The song never directly states as much. It would be harmful of me to imply that it is indeed about depression when it is not directly stated, only hinted at, and not confirmed. Just to be clear. Anyway, there's this acceptance that comes with this person, and in that acceptance the singer says that the currents can guide the path. And then the music cuts out, and then he says, swim against the tide, as though he's forgotten he's not allowed to become complacent when he's fighting off what he is. And then the next line being the returning motif of a failure to recognize, but this time it adds for you to see the best in me. That shit hit, and it hit different, and I'm feeling things for sure. That I'm definitely feeling things. But I'll go into that more later. After another chorus, play that funny goodbye metal band. It's probably the two verses that mean the most to me. The first saying that when all hope seems gone and the singer was taking in water from not being able to fight these tides, he'd breathe in the other person and have the will to continue to fight more. But it's the second verse, the breakdown, that really hits for me. You can't have one without the other. It doesn't work. If you remove the prior verse, the context from the prior verse, the breakdown simply doesn't work as well. But the inverse is true. And for the last time, will you follow me tonight to the depths where my demons hide? It's where the song stops being about a simple "I need you here" and becomes "I need you here because I cannot fight this on my own." And that difference is substantial. There's a lot of songs about "I need you here," but this extra context and how it comes into play is what makes this song a monumental standout for me, especially with how it's worded. It's not, "Hey, come with me," because helping. It's, "Are you willing to?" And while it can be read as maybe a little problematic, I think it's sort of amazing the way it's worded. No, it's not really on the other person to help the singer with their problems, but it's directly asking this person because the singer already feels comfort from this person. I'm saying this person a lot. Furthermore, previously on the song, the singer stated that they don't need the other person to even do anything else except act as a sort of anchor and safe point for them. To me, the implication is very much, "You're the way I've managed so far. Can you help me finish this so I don't have to keep doing this?" And as much as I and many of you know firsthand it simply doesn't work that way, I think we can also agree that feeling like you have an anchor in someone to help ground you and help find safety and comfort, it's simply invaluable when you're dealing with things like this. Doubly so when you're going through a particularly rough patch, such as what the singer and band have clearly expressed and will continue expressing through the duration of this EP. On top of that, we even see a sort of story progression through this, the last song being about isolation and needing someone, and this song being about finding someone and being able to confide and find solace in them. And if you buy into that storyline, then the real tragedy is if you tab back in to the video to see that editing storytelling moment, I'm sorry to have tricked you. You now owe me one like for being bamboozled. The next song is actually I mentioned before, this is the song I got into this band on. I know I've said a few words since then, but I promise I said it. The song starts off with this chunky kind of riff before it gets added to with these metalcore style high notes and slides, and the lyrics start. While this does feel a bit like Deviant so far, there's already a lot more going on here. Unraveled to me is more about anger in this situation and much less about desperate vying for help. This is pretty well shown in the opening verse. Will I be enough to keep the pain away when I can't save myself? Aching to be seen but left alone again, beaten and torn up, pulling me up on the rope. Then the pre-chorus happens. Don't worry, I'm not going to read that one out. I will, however, put way too much detail in talking about it. The pre-chorus mentions switchblades twice. In between it talks about being on the verge of becoming estranged, and finally pleading to have these feelings cut out of the very bones. And the last word being the part that morphs the song into the chorus. It comes across less as a deliberate thought process and rationalization, instead coming across more like this barrage of words that are said in the heat of the moment contrasted with the chorus. There's backing vocals, and the instrumentation trades the chunky riff for a much more rhythmic and ordered feeling sound. To me, it's almost like a moment of clarity, the point where your head clears but the anger is still there. You're not really thinking about the words coming out of your mouth, but there they spill. And the lyrics seem to reflect that. Pain's dragging me under, your words still make me wonder. When I lose control, remember who we once were. The pain's dragging me under, slip this feeling from my bones. To me, the emphasis on pain in the chorus seems to be indicative that these aren't exactly actions or words being condoned, but rather words said in the heat of the moment, as I had previously mentioned. And with the lines about losing control and remembering who they were, it seems to supplement that idea. Even with the implication that the other person is saying something to cause this pain and lashing out from the singer. And I think most of us have said things we regret in the heat of an argument. I think all of us have had hurtful things said to us in those same instances. Things that have deeply affected us. And to me, that's what this song is about. However, as we will uncover, this song seems to be about going a lot farther with that sentiment, and I think nothing exemplifies that better than the end of the next verse and the bridge. What does it take to make it up to you? I tried to follow, but you keep pushing me farther down. Come on, go, push me over the edge, cause at the end of the day, we'll be hanging from the same rope. First off, holy shit, that bridge is good. Yeah, go ahead, treat me like shit, it doesn't matter. You will be buried with me when this is all over. That goes hard. Moment of gushing over, the singer is directly asking, what does it take to make up for the wrong he's put the other person through? It's actually said twice, but it's incomplete the first time. And it adds a lot of highlighting on that point specifically, only to have the line about constantly being pushed down when you're trying to atone is kind of a gut punch. To be clear, we don't exactly know what they did, but it seems just words of anger. Even so, no one is entitled to forgiveness for anything they've done, and I almost feel like it's recognized in the bridge that goes way too hard. It's almost saying, even if you never forgive me, we still, in the end, will be in the same boat. Implying the self-destructive behavior isn't solely on the part of the singer, but also the other person. After that's done, there's another chorus, and then another part I want to put way too much time on. Bridge 2 is very interesting. According to the official lyrics, it consists of 2 verses, but for the sake of convenience, I'm going to consider it 1 verse. As the previous chorus at this point ends, we've been somewhat conditioned to expect a drop into chunky riffs, but this doesn't happen. There's this more stripped back bit wherein the song almost feels like a calm, if only for a moment. And then it gets back to that chunk. But during that calm, the lines, I feel death between my toes, on this rotting ground, take me away. Just this moment of realization that none of what's going on is healthy, but even leaving can be a struggle. And it would be remiss of me if I didn't mention the toes line. Yeah, it's goofy. It could have been reworded. I understand it's implying the feeling has permeated every part of the body, but it's just goofy. It's just silly. It doesn't. It's so. It takes so much of the impact out. But you know what? I can somewhat forgive it because the impact does come in with full force on the second half of this verse, which again is technically 2 verses, but convenience. Moving on. All these years I've been waiting for you to come around. Now it all means shit. It is, to me, not only a recognition of the sour way this relationship has turned, but moreover, that it hadn't turned to begin with. And with the chunky riffs coming back at this point, it really elevates that idea. It was always like that. It was just unseen. And now that things have hit the point that they currently are, it's all for nothing. And the singer has been stuck in this feeling of pain and desire for it to end. And as much as he's wanted that other person, he understands that he's made mistakes and they're not willing to let him atone for it, seeming to almost revel in the fact that the mistakes were made and keeping him down with those mistakes. And I think we've all been there to some extent, where we've made mistakes and tried to make up for it, but felt like it was constantly insufficient. And we just had to continuously make up for that same mistake over and over. And a bit of personal advice: if you've done something wrong and you're constantly being given the impression that nothing you do can make up for it, then you may not want that person in your life. Learn your lesson and become a better person. But if someone's just going to continue holding that mistake over you despite being better for the mistake, like you've grown from it and made up for it the best you can, then it's just kind of like you're making up for a mistake in bad faith, and it's not really going to be conducive to you actually growing as a person. At least in my opinion. I go back and forth on this song, not whether or not it's good or bad. The song is peak. No, I go back and forth on whether it's my favorite song on this EP, or if it's the title track. We'll get there, and I will have a lot to say on that one. Have patience. The song opens with the line, "Lose myself in you." After a bit of this less distorted and more volatile riff plays. And while volatile may not be the right word, I can't think of a better term, so it's what we're going with. I can't catch my breath. In all these years that you've been gone, thought you were my death, but the sun rose again to prove me wrong. It's the first half of the first verse. And while I feel most of it is pretty self-explanatory, I do wish to highlight the second half of what I read. The thought of "I can't go on without you" is, again, not a new concept, especially in songs, but the wording is something special here. Saying that the singer thought the person would be the end of who the singer is, and still the sun came up. And the rising sun is a narrative through line in this song. Also, I love the little almost hard rock riff just before this verse kicks in. It's like really melodic, and it sounds like the one part I could actually play like on my own guitar. Then again, I probably couldn't. I'm not that good. Anyway, the chorus comes in, and I think it's very interesting. The song slows down, stripping back to a more lighter drumming and just a bit of plucking on the guitars as the vocalist comes in with the line, "Can't wait to cover my eyes from thee," with the last two words being completely isolated to just vocals. It's honestly beautiful. I feel like I haven't really put enough words into just how good the production on this album is. Anyway, after the instruments come back on the next words, "sunrise." And there we see the narrative through line that's coming into play on this track. The chorus goes on to say that the sunrise is what reminds the singer of what will never be between him and this other person. There's 3 lines in the 6-line chorus dedicated to hoping they don't lose themselves in the other person. It's giving denial, for lack of a better term. The lyrics in this chorus are very much about trying not to see what's right there, desperately trying to hide from the fact that things are over, but understanding at the same time that it is. time has moved on and there's nothing to be done about it. But that doesn't make the constant reminders of what's been lost less painful, which is amplified in the next verse. It seems the years have taken their toll. There are cracks in my heart, but no light shines through. And with that, we come to almost understand why the sunrise is a painful reminder. If we assume, based on this context, that the cracks are formed from the other person, be it them leaving or through some sort of other means, then we get the idea that with no light shining through and the sunrise being a light, well, you can put two and two together. Nothing stands in my way, so grab a hold of me or die in this place. It's the next verse before the pre-chorus I have not mentioned because I don't want to. In these lines, the singer is saying that regardless of anything else, he's going to continue pressing forward and moving on. As hard as those reminders have been for him, he's going to do so. And we even see this completion of this arc in the bridge. We've seen he doesn't want to look at the sunrise for the painful reminder it is, but the bridge says, "Now I can't wait to close my eyes, feel the sunrise up inside. Let it shine through my skin, consume the darkness I'm living in." Not only is it growth from what's been gnawing on him this whole song, but it recontextualizes the sunrise itself. It's metaphorical, not literal. It's about growth and accepting the change and moving on and becoming better and letting go. And he even strengthens that resolve with this new line in the pre-chorus. "And I will stay, yeah, I will stay, let the light consume me." Overall, the song is about moving on and growing from things, but it's only when he resolves himself and actually faces this that he's able to truly move on. As the song mentions in the beginning, this has been going on for a while, and it seems like his reaction has always been to hide from it, move on and run away. But much like in life, staying and facing the feelings is sometimes what needs to happen. Running away from one's feelings is never going to help, and recognizing that is what brought him to finally understanding that the sunrise he was so afraid to witness was inside of him the entire time, if he had only stayed. And obviously, this is very context specific and not something anyone should apply to any problem at all, but it's something comforting for me that it's not just me whose first thought is to just run away from any emotion. Much like the other non-single track on this album, Deviant, Obscurity starts off with just synth and some drums. Part of me feels like Accvsed doesn't exactly like the vibe of their synths, since it's only seems to come up on non-single tracks, the B-sides if you will, but I don't really get why. Like, the synth intro sounds nice, plus the more laid back feel that just sort of lets you vibe is a nice reprieve from the otherwise heavy hitting songs. That being said, this is my least favorite track on this EP, so maybe they're onto something by not making it part of the singles. I don't know for sure. Why are we awake when all that we hope for is sleep? What are we searching for in the fog when there's nothing to see? It's how the song kicks off. More chill but slightly threatening tone of the intro, replaced with this really well done riff and drums, and pretty much immediately highlights the point of this song. Like, I could leave this section at that, but I won't, because I want to talk about this band because I'm overly interested in it. Anyway, it comes out of the gate questioning why they're bothering to continue when there's not a visible or tangible reason before the next verse, which is a slight tone shift. You're beautiful, just staring at me, but you've got nothing to say that I want to hear. I don't want to hear. with the last two lines being slightly muted in their delivery. To me, the implication is that there's still nothing really, and even if this other person says things that are harmful or disingenuous, the singer still wants to listen to those words. However, that comes with the caveat of the muted delivery. In such, it almost feels like a tacked on statement like, oops, my words came out wrong, let me fix it. But the fixing part of the statement comes across distant, not quite there, quiet, and not as heard. And that I feel it's almost pointing to the idea that we sometimes feel our apologies aren't really heard, but I don't feel this idea is further explored within the song, thus falling somewhat flat. In fact, it promptly goes to the feelings of isolation during a struggle we've seen in this album a few times already, all with a slightly different trajectory to them. In this case, isolation in a public space. The next verse reads, I don't want to know who you are. I don't want to know why I'm here. No space to move on, in sadness I roam. Thousands in this room, yet I feel alone. And it reminds me of another song, one of my personal favorite bands of all time, Basement. And this band reminds me a lot of Basement for reasons I'll get into more later, but the song in question is Canada Square, in which their lead singer, Andrew Fisher, says, in a room so full of people, I've never felt so all alone. And to me, these two mean the same thing, but I actually think Accvsed does a better job exemplifying the point being made here. It's not just a crowded room, it's a room full of thousands who you don't know, thousands that aren't letting you move on and are keeping you trapped there, and you're stuck helpless to them. And it's not like knowing why seemingly would help the lead singer. He says as much. He doesn't even want to know who the other person who's presumably helping him is, saying it like it's this completely superfluous information that does nothing to meet his goals. Also, I wanna bring this up. I know what the official lyrics are. I get them from the description on the band's YouTube, right? Like the videos, each video has like in the description all the lyrics for every song, which I personally really appreciate because it tells me this is the official lyrics, right? But it doesn't sound like he's saying sadness, right? It sounds like he's saying sickness. I guess let me know what y'all think here. Anyway, the chorus comes in, and it almost comes across like he wants to be treated like a lost dog. You know? Almost. Blindly strolling through, would you take this leash and lead me? I will follow you, so take your hope and feed me. To me, it comes across like a loss of will to try. It's a simple, do what needs to be done to get me out of here, please. The next verse almost highlights this to me. Will you keep going until your legs are sore? Until you make something from nothing? What are we? What are we searching for? Do you know where we're going? As those words are sung, the backing track dials back the track for this part of the track, the same way that happened when the beautiful line happened, the one I mentioned earlier in the song, coming across like this genuine question. Speaking of the instrumentation, to me, it feels like a thick fog save for these dialed back parts. So it very much comes across like the singer is being genuine, and it's what's cutting through the fog, this layer of obscurity for them. Circling back though, the wording is actually quite interesting to me, asking if the person who presumably has the leash will continue until they can't anymore, implying the question of if they would be able to find the point when the point simply doesn't seem to exist. Within the reach of this room, they are trapped. And then just flat out ask if they even know what they're looking for, or if they even know where their end goal is. Then the bridge happens, and the tone seems to change. I almost feel as though the bridge is from the perspective of this other person. I can't confirm that completely, it just feels more like a rebuttal. And if you keep going till your legs are sore, we will make something from nothing. On top of just tonally coming across completely different, this is almost conviction in delivery, right? As if to say, no, we will be okay, there is a point, we simply have to make it. And after one more chorus, the outro kicks in. And for me, there's a lot here. The post-chorus has that cut through the fog feeling I mentioned, with the dialed back instrumentation. And the next verse kicks into gear, the fog comes back in. In some regards, I think the fog is something coming from the singer himself by this implication, though nothing in this outro or the rest of the song would suggest as such. No space to move on, in sadness I roam, together alone. Vibrations move out, bodies and numb out minds. Give me something real before we die. Take this leash and lead me. To me, this outro is more evocative of we may be moving forward and we may never understand why, but still we do, even unwillingly, to some extent. And with that comes a pretty heavy emphasis on the idea that you don't really have to know why to keep moving forward. And I kind of think that's a really important takeaway. If you didn't gather from the rest of me rambling about this song, it's a very existential song to me, and to me, I'm not sure Accvsed really nailed it here. As I mentioned before, this is my least favorite track. It's still a really solid song, and for me, at least, the message of you don't really need to know why to continue despite continuing is pretty powerful, at least to me. That being said, if you're still here, I want to give you a moment. Take a quick break. If you have had any trouble mentally getting through this, you should probably stop now. This next song is a contender for my favorite by this band, just period. But it's also pretty heavy, emotionally speaking. Go grab something to drink real quick. Go for that walk you've been saying you were gonna do. I will be here when you get back. I built a house of doubt, and now I'm coming home. They're misheard lyrics. According to the official lyrics in the description of the music video, the actual lyrics say, I call it home. And it's not like a one-off. It's the actual line every single time without fail. But that small misheard lyric is what caused me to watch this band, and this song ended up being the reason I would buy the album a little over 2 months later. I built a house of doubt, and now I'm coming home. I'm about to get really personal here. If you're not interested, I suggest you leave now. I had what most people would probably call a rough upbringing. Being gaslit and guilt-tripped into things were very common occurrences, and it was normalized in my head. I was usually the scapegoat for anything and everything that went wrong in the house, and I believed it. After all, 5 people all saying the same thing can't be wrong, right? They're coming to get me, I hear it in the walls. I built a house of doubt, and now I'm coming home. I've been fortunate enough to leave the situation, but it really hasn't made things any easier. I still spend a lot of time dwelling on what happened and how I constantly was just mistreated and taken advantage of my entire life. It's the entire reason my online presence is what it is, because I'm terrified of them finding me and harassing me more, doing what they've done my entire life and making my life miserable with whatever lie, manipulation, or pure spite they feel is needed to achieve their goal. Does it hurt when you're speaking of me? The entire time I lived there, I felt like I was simply not allowed to be happy. I wasn't permitted to do better for myself, or any feeling I had was constantly shut down without a moment of hesitation, and it hurt. It hurt a lot, and it still hurts. If you knew who I've been before, you could see. what the shell I have built was for, because I don't know anymore. And I think I'm allowed to feel hurt. I think I'm allowed to feel pain and heartache that the people I not only trusted but spent so much time of my life with left me feeling constantly like I was worthless, and that I was not allowed to experience those feelings because any emotion I had was a problem. You thought you came here to hear a trans girl talk about a fun metal band. Welcome to my fucking therapy session. It rips and tears a hole. Save yourself. I always thought this was me. There must be something more than we can see. I've been putting lyrics, quotes throughout this section. You've probably already drawn the parallel that the song is related to that situation for me. Part of the reason I've always loved music is it's the only way any emotion I felt became valid to me, because all of that shit but this song is very much a validating feeling to me. It's almost like it was saying all the things I never felt like I could. The song deals with these unhealthy coping mechanisms with lines, "I'm trapped inside these thoughts and smoke that dulls my mind." And I think while the implication is meant to be weed, I'd be lying if I said I didn't relate to it, as I had started smoking nicotine, partially to help cope with the abuse I dealt with on a daily basis. It even deals with gaslighting in two instances for me. The first being, "Drown the noise, for once that's all I need, just a moment of integrity," which is followed by the shell line I had mentioned in my big moment, I guess. The second being, "Drowning in self-doubt, can you trust when you look in my face, or are we the same?" Which is in the same verse as the "speaking of me" line, the latter happening twice. A lot of people have asked me what type of music I tend to like, and when asked I usually reply, "I'll listen to just about anything," and that's largely true, because I will. And it's also because when people ask me that, I feel it's more about genre and not necessarily the artistic message behind what the artwork is. This is it. I want work of art that feels like my emotions are seen, and that does typically come from rock and metal, but it's not inherent. There's a place for darker works and arts that have emotional weight, but it's not for everyone. And bands that do have those for me, I call them the basement effect bands, after the first band that hit like that for me. I'm sure you noticed I cut House of Doubt's review down pretty short. Part of the basement effect is, in a way, I don't feel like you really find these bands, they find you. When you need them, they come into your life and exist for you. And maybe this video finding you is that sign for you. Even if you don't go look them up or follow a link or whatever the case, you've heard of them now. And maybe when you see them pop up, you'll give them your time. They deserve it for the art they produce. And full disclosure, I would be remiss to mention that if I had the talent, my music would very likely be very similar to Accvsed. My personal first EP was meant to be this very heavy emotional thing that hits very similar to how Accvsed does. I lack the talent of the members in this band, but I still feel that it's a point I should mention for honesty and transparency. And that's something really special to me. Like, I started making music around the same time they did, and I had my first EP out around a year before theirs was, and then I found them. They scratched the exact itch I was trying to scratch with my own music. But again, I have a lack of talent. Anyways, I mentioned it before, but do check them out. When you do, come back. Tell me how your interpretations differ from mine. It's genuinely fascinating hearing people tell me how they interpret songs. I've always found that so fascinating. a lot of time, as I'm sure you've noticed, I inject my personal struggles into my personal interpretations of songs. And I think everyone does that to some extent, and since, we're all different people with our own unique experiences, maybe you'll come across House of Doubt by Accvsed and walk away with a different understanding than I could have ever rationalized when I first heard it. But I would really be excited for what you have to say about it, and what you have to say about this band in general. As for me, I built a house of doubt, and now I call it home.